Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And it's a Seahawks Saturday. And we've got my buddy Jeff Simmons ready to spend some time with us talking about all things Seahawks, all things NFL. And let me just start by checking in with you, Jeff. What's going on for you on this fine Saturday?
Not too much, man. Not too much. It's always tough on the weekends now. Like I'm just so excited for Sundays during football season. It's like Saturdays. I'm not a big college football guy. I only really watch it for the draft. And like once the weather starts to dwindle a little bit here, it's like I just feel like I'm just waiting for Sunday all Saturdays.
Yes.
I need to learn to enjoy my Saturdays more. I don't know. We have the show, which is good, but
yeah, I have not been able to yet transition my enthusiasm for the draft into getting really into the college football season. Like I wish I've thought about it. I kind of almost committed to it, but I'm just not that interested. And part of it's also, I'm not that interested in this class. Now everyone's saying that this could be a really deep class, but I'm not particularly enamored with any of these guys. Like Quinn, is it Ewers, whatever it is down in Texas. I think he's a trash quarterback. I think Shedeur Sanders is like, Like, I don't know. Are you finding guys that are attracting your attention in this class?
not at all. Not at all. And the thing that I'd heard, but some people have been arguing with me, but I heard there's not a lot of blue chip players in this draft. And there's not a lot of guys that there's a lot of quarterbacks that are kind of emerging, but I don't even know if we're going to be looking for a quarterback now. And the whole league's going to be looking for offensive linemen. And I have not seen any player that's like, oh, I'm going to watch this guy every week. I don't have a college football team. So there's not too much that there's not a player that's driving me to watch every week. I barely watch. Me and Evan went to a UW game, which was kind of cool, but we looked up their prospects at the game. I think they had two guys in the top 300. So I was a year late on that one. And then Michigan's like one of the closer ones to me. Again, they lost basically their whole team. So
yeah,
I'm with you. Like there's not a single player that's going to be like, I'm going to watch this college game tonight.
Well, and that there. Yeah, it's interesting because Michigan and UW have supplied a significant chunk of NFL talent over the past few seasons, not even just last year, but the past few years. And then you got Nick Saban leaving Alabama, and you wonder what that's doing. Georgia's still Georgia, but the quarterback class feels to me really suspect. And I'm not a Jalen Milroe guy. I'm definitely not, Quinn guy. I think Arch Manning's interesting. I don't think he's coming out this year. So, I don't know, man. This is coming from a place of ignorance, though, because I haven't spent the time actually watching. So hopefully we'll get there. But one of the things you and I talked about doing that I thought would be fun to do today is actually do a little early revisiting of some of these recent drafts for the Seahawks, who they could have taken, who they did take, how those things have kind of panned out. And obviously, it's 2 games into the 2024 season. So looking back at the 2024 draft, some people are going to say that's silly. Well, we do silly things on this show because we have time to. And you and I are doing it anyway, so we might as well do it for others to have their opinions shared as well. Before we get into that, let me do a couple quick things. I want to welcome Old Fish Guy is a new member. I love that username. Old Fish Guy is a member. Welcome to the crew. Super happy every time we get someone new joining the show. And also just want to remind everyone, actually, there's something new today. FTN Fantasy, the Hawks promo code has been so popular. We are actually changing. We are changing. The new promo code, if you want to get the deal, is HBAM or HBAM, if you want to go with that. Hawk Blogger Mornings. HBAM is your new promo code for FTN Fantasy. If you want to go over to FTN Fantasy, get FTN Plus subscription or greater, you now have to use the HBAM promo code to do it. So make sure, if you haven't already, I'm a subscriber. You should be as well. I think you'll really appreciate having access to all that data. HBAM is your new promo code. All right. So, one of the things is, let's kick it off a little bit. One of the things that sparked this, at least in my mind, was news that came out, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was this morning, I'm not sure, but Troy Fautanu of University of Washington was getting a chance. It was going to be starting, and then had something happen with his knee this week in practice, and he's not going to play. And they're not sure what's going on with his knee. And this is the second knee injury he's had since being drafted. I think he had a meniscus issue during camp that also kept him out. And Mike Tomlin had some really, I don't know, concerning quotes about him. I don't know if you read those, Jeff. Did you see
No,
those?
I haven't seen them.
So this is the quote I'll say for what this is. Tomlin talking about his plan to rotate the tackles. I had intentions of utilizing both guys. I acknowledged that Troy was healthy. I acknowledged that Troy was capable. That's why we started him. But I rolled him because I had concerns about his level of conditioning. He's a young guy. He's new to me. He's new to the NFL. I didn't know how fatigue would affect his play in terms of detail, so I tried to ward off some of that. I backed off of playing Broderick as much as I thought, and I held my breath and I played Troy. That's not encouraging, man. Like, and then he's hurt. So, I mean, this is a guy that was probably the most commonly mocked to the Seahawks, right?
Yeah.
And we were like very excited about the potential of him. What would be happening right now in Seahawks land if you subtract Byron Murphy and you add another offensive lineman who is struggling with knee injuries?
It would be pretty brutal when you consider that Lucas is out. The offensive line's been a problem. And think about how many years where their first round pick has gotten injured, or their first round pick. There was like a crazy stretch where like their first round player was like never in training camp, or their highest drafted pick. It was like last year initially. Witherspoon was hurt, or then after he held out, and then D. Eskridge and all that. And there was like a year to year where LJ Collier gets hurt in training camp, and it would just feel like more of the same. And it's just crazy. So listen, if you're one of those guys the last 2 weeks watching our guard play, and it's like, man, I wish we had Troy Fautanu, I wouldn't blame you. Like, it's been hard not having that guard position be an issue again. But Brady Henderson, I don't know if you remember this, Brian. I'm sure you do. Me and you are pretty twisted. But right after the draft, Brady had a really good like intel story about their kind of operation. And he said that Troy Fautanu was off their board because of a red flag medical issue, which turned out to be a knee. And now he's on a second knee injury. It's week 3. And he missed a lot of camp. And you got to say, it looks like the Seahawks got that one right. It's a little early to say that. We're not here celebrating that, like Troy Fautanu, a guy we all like. And if you've ever heard him interview on like Brock and Saw, awesome guy. So we're not celebrating, but it seems like they were onto something about a potential red flag knee. And I had not heard that much in the draft process. I remember Albert Breer kind of slipped it in too. And yeah, it turns out that looks like the Seahawks did get that right. And if they had another injured guy up front, like, man, it would be super discouraging right now. And Byron Murphy, I think it was Fowler and Graziano did their weekly thing, and they were calling Byron Murphy one of the more impressive rookies in the whole league so far.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that came out, you mentioned Brady, that's a good reminder. Brady also reported that the Seahawks were particularly interested in J.C. Latham.
Yeah.
And that was maybe their top guy on their board. And if he had fallen to them, he might have been their pick over even Byron Murphy. Mm-hmm. And if you look at J.C. Latham, he ended up going 7 to the Titans. I'm just looking at him for the first time right now, Jeff. He's playing left tackle for them, which he obviously would not have played for the Seahawks. But he's holding his own. I mean, his first game, he struggled. He had a 45 pass block grade. But his overall grade right now is 68.4. He had a 76.2 pass block grade against the Jets, which are, a decent defensive line. So I don't know that would have been a disaster, but I'm curious, like, if you could snap your fingers, Jeff, and you could have J.C. Latham versus Byron Murphy, is there part of you that would rather have J.C. Latham?
No, no. Byron Murphy is to me a more high ceiling player. Not only are interior defensive tackles super rare to get, I think Latham was projected as a guard. And I'm not certain he would have been like a Pro Bowl level guard. So I would have taken Murphy. I think the Seahawks went into the draft thinking there's almost no chance they were going to get Murphy. I think Latham was a guy they thought as like a more realistic option. So it took a crazy sequence of events for even them to get Murphy. And funny enough, the guy me and you really liked, Talis Fuaga. He looks like the best one of all those linemen. He's playing left tackle for the Saints, and we thought he could be a right tackle or a guard. But no, I would much rather have Byron Murphy than Latham, even though there's clearly a big organizational issue at guard still.
Yeah. Yeah, Fuaga ends up going 14 to New Orleans, so he was like 2 spots ahead of the Seahawks. He's playing well. Like he's holding down the left tackle spot, which again, like everyone was talking about him as right tackle, and Latham, I don't remember people thinking Latham was going to be a left tackle either. So a lot of these guys are getting thrown into premium spots, and Fuaga has just been solid across the board. Had a 75 pass block grade in his first game against the Panthers, which probably doesn't say that much. Had a 68 grade overall against the Cowboys. Has a 70.9 grade through 2 games as a left tackle as a rookie for like the number 1 offense in football. So Fuaga looks like a hit. Let's play that game. I mean, you kind of just spoke to it, but if you could have Fuaga instead of Byron Murphy, do you make that move?
That's the only one that would make me think twice because he looks like I think the thing with Murphy that I still think I would take Murphy because I think me and you have done the studies over the years. The ability to get those interior defensive tackles are almost as rare as any position. And this is a guy that should have gone in the top 10. As much as I do like Fuaga, I think you can find a right tackle or a guard in most drafts. And I know I'm probably going to get ripped on for just saying passing on an offensive lineman. But I still think Byron Murphy was a guy I would have had graded higher than Fuaga.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I am. And I certainly appreciate Fuaga as a player. I wouldn't be sad to have him on the line at all. But I'm coming from a place where very few are. I believe Abe Lucas is going to come back. I believe Abe Lucas is going to be a good player for this team. And if you knew that, like, let's just play that game for a second. If you knew Abe Lucas was coming back in a few weeks and you knew he was going to be a good right tackle, then Fuaga, like, does he really, like, you could play him at guard, but I think that's a waste of who he is.
Agreed.
And I don't think you're going to move Lucas or Cross. So then you have this kind of situation where I don't think you're getting the most out of your roster if you have another quality tackle that isn't really playing. So, I mean, as far as building out a roster of talented players at key positions, I have a hard time. Like, let's play this game for a second, Jeff. You could have any player in the 2024 draft, any player, and I'll just do that. I'll do it simply for the first, and I just want to hear your answer. Who do you take? Knowing what you know now, who do you take for the Seahawks?
Ooh. Like, it would be hard not to take Byron Murphy. I probably would take Harrison Jr.
Over any of the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I don't love.
Really? I'm really not. I don't think that's a bad answer at all. But I think that's a fascinating one.
If Stroud was involved, I'm not sure I'm sold on Caleb Williams. And he's probably the right answer. Probably a Caleb Williams, but I don't know. Something about him makes me very uneasy. And maybe I'm just overreacting to small samples. But I just think like Harris, I hate the idea of like prioritizing a wide receiver over a lineman, over a defensive tackle, over a quarterback. I just think Harrison Jr. is just like a home run. Like, there's no way that guy doesn't work out. But probably the wrong answer from team building perspective.
Mm.
Like, not taking an offensive or defensive lineman or a quarterback for a wide receiver on a team that already has good wide receivers. But then that way, like, there's just so many things you could do. You can open up, like, you can have DK and him for a year. You could trade DK later for picks. You don't have to pay DK $30 million. It really kind of creates like a really cycle of events for you. But yeah, when you look at the top quarterbacks of Drake May, and I don't know, I haven't seen enough of Drake May and study him that close, I'll be honest. But it certainly wouldn't be JJ McCarthy or Penix of any guy I could have. It certainly wouldn't be Bo Nix. I don't know if Jaden Daniels behind the Seahawks offensive line would be the thing I'd be wanting protecting. And I'm Caleb Williams. I'm not sure on him yet. Like, I know he's super talented, but he needs, I don't know. What would you say?
Well, I mean, usually I should have an answer before I ask the question. And I think that here's where I'm at, is that it's a question about whether there's someone I would certainly draft ahead of Byron Murphy.
That's
it's a question. It's not like, I'm not saying for sure that's the guy, but I look down, I'm not even looking ahead of him. I'm looking behind him as well. I'm scrolling through these names, and we'll talk about some of our favorites and how they're playing, but I've been skeptical about Caleb Williams from the get-go. Both his makeup and his ability to play within the structure of an NFL offense. I think both, especially the latter, is what's showing up so far. It's only 2 games. He's got absolutely generational talent. That's probably the right answer no matter what, because you just got to take a shot that's going to pan out. I think Jaden Daniels is playing okay. I know a lot of people are clowning on him, but I think he's looking like I think the arrow's up on Jaden Daniels more than it's up on Caleb Williams through 2 games. Joe Alt, I think, looks like
that's
cornerstone left tackle, and you have a cornerstone. Hopefully, we'll talk about that in a sec. But I don't know that you have a place for him, but I think Joe Alt's value is likely going to end up being higher than Byron Murphy's, but hard to say for sure. Malik Neighbors, arrows up on him.
He looks really good.
Like, when I get down to it, of the guys picked ahead of him, I think it's a very small number that I would say I would like even consider drafting ahead of Byron Murphy. And I think that's a pretty crazy outcome when you have the 16th pick in the first round.
Oh yeah, it's wild. If you look like who went 16 the year before, it's like the kind of player you get there is typically nothing close to that. And there's been some good players, like you're right, like Neighbors looks like a hit. Brock Bowers looks really, really good. But again, those are positions that it seem like tight ends is not as a luxury position.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive tackles, just like you see what happened to the Rams. Like, they take Aaron Donald out of there, and they look completely different. It's just, and you see what happened with the Titans now that they got Sweat and they got Jeffrey Simmons in there, and they've been one of the harder defenses to play against. It's just defensive tackles like become such a premium position, and they're so hard to acquire. And if they hit free agency, you saw like what some of these guys go for. You saw what's his name went for in San Francisco, who's been a non-impact guy since he's gone there, $20 million a year. So it's really hard to pass up a player at that position on a team where you didn't have like a cornerstone young guy there. Like the fact that fell to 16 is still pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, as I go through this, I mean, the other take I'll just offer that's not about the Seahawks, I still don't think it's out of the question that Michael Penix will end up being the best quarterback in this class. From what I've seen of the way these guys play, I still think he throws the best ball. I think that he operates within structure better than Caleb Williams by far. I think that showed up in college. I just would not count that guy out. And I honestly, watching Kirk Cousins play, I think Michael Penix would be a better player for them right now. Like, I think Kirk Cousins looks either not back or he looks washed. Like the velocity on his throws, his arm strength looks way down.
Yeah, other than that last drive, it's like the game-winning drive for them where he was just like not really running the offense and just like running basic plays. He has not looked good. He can't really move. And like if you think of like how you can juice up that offense in an indoor stadium with those weapons, like Penix, it's such a that's the frustrating part if you're a Penix fan. It's honestly the best, and they have a very good offensive line on paper. Like they've had ups and down moments, but with Bijan and those receiving targets, it's such a perfect offense for him, and it's tough. They have such a sunk cost on Cousins. We might not get to see him, but the first game he looked absolutely broken. He started
Yeah.
to show a little bit in the last game, but still, Penix's ability where he can move and his age and his deep ball, and that's not a strength of Cousins. So man, if when this guy gets to play, he's in such a good system for him to succeed. And you might not be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not coming off that yet. Just like I'm not coming off my Will McDonald.
That's look
take.
better. That's look better.
It's looking better, dude. He's like at 4.5 sacks already. So yeah, we won't stay all on this, but like playing the other kind of game I wanted to play is what was one of the most what was the hardest question that we kept asking? Stick or trade back?
Yeah.
Right? And we were thinking about, okay, if we trade back, we're doing it to get a second round pick. And we had some guys in the second round we were interested in. We kept going back and forth between, do you go offensive line first? And one of the common things we would say is, okay, you trade back and then you draft like a Graham Barton, or maybe you get a Fautanu or something like that. And then you go in the second round. And who were some of the defensive tackles we were talking about? Like, who was my favorite 3-tech after Byron Murphy?
Michael Hall.
How's that working out?
These are things we cannot know about, though. We didn't know about Fautanu's knee. We don't get to do medical tests. We don't get character evaluations. So we're just evaluating player prospect profiles. The Michael Hall thing is obviously something we're not privy to. Apparently, he was off a lot of teams' boards because of character evaluation. And there was a pretty serious domestic violence case going on right now. We both probably feel pretty silly because we spent so many mock drafts being like, we need to get this guy, Michael Hall. He's 20 years old. He has so much talent. And it's like, if they had Fautanu and him right now, the prospects of that draft would be looking very shaky right to start with an injured offensive lineman and a red flagged character defensive lineman. So that's the tricky part. But I will say this. Jared Verse and Graham Barton, two of the guys we were super high on because we didn't think Murphy would be there. They both look pretty good so far.
Yeah. Let me get a super chat up here. 12th Man North says, a Canadian YouTube member.
Yeah, this is...
with the draft not looking phenomenal at the top, would either of you be comfortable trading a 1, 2, 3, first, second, or third round pick for an impact starter, O-line, edge, linebacker? Great work on the channel, Brian and Jeff. They're talking about the 2025 draft.
Yeah.
What do you think there, Jeff?
My answer is no. The Leonard Williams trade, ultimately, we can still take quibbles with it. It was not a good trade from a process standpoint, but he's playing well, and they have him signed now, and he's been one of their best players. But I think if you think about another thing here, this team has a lot of players that are going to have to sign in the next few years. We're spending the show talking about how good their drafts have been, but that means there's going to be a lot of bills coming due at the same time. So I think they're going to need to have some young, cost-controlled players in there as well. I know it's crazy saying that a lot of our teams are last 3 drafts. So unless like a really good offensive guard that like you can get for a second or third round pick comes up, then for me the answer is no. I don't like trades like that are shortcuts. I think you need to do to the draft. And obviously they do have an organizational issue at guard right now. But no, I do not like them doing that. That Leonard Williams thing made us all queasy. I think we need to get away from being shorthanded in the draft. And I think they need to go into these drafts with a full stack at their hands, and then they can move around there.
Yeah, 100% agree. Chris Clark has gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. Chris, my favorite thing that happens, I really, really appreciate when people do this. If you are one of the people that gets a free membership, please consider paying it forward. Bring in other new, generous, kind people. And I think there was a question here. Detail wanted to know, are we back over 1,000 subs yet? Sorry to say the answer is no. We're going the other direction. We're under 900 now. So again, people that get these gifted memberships, it's amazing. One of the things they can do is paying it forward by giving other people free memberships. Another great way to do it is just to renew yours, because you only get 1 month for free. We would love to have you for longer, and we'd love to keep growing the community. Okay, so other thing that we talked about a lot was, okay, Jeff, who was the guy that was commonly debated as the number one defensive tackle on the board?
Johnny Newton.
Johnny Newton. How's that going?
It looks pretty sizable gap between the two of them. And a lot of the film guys just thought Newton was more explosive as a pass rusher. But Newton had an injury, and he didn't get to work out a lot, and that was a big reason why his draft stock was a little different. But a lot of the film people thought they were neck and neck, and a lot of the smartest people I follow on here, I'm not taking shots at them, but they had Newton over Murphy. And Newton missed most of the offseason because of a foot injury. And how many times that happened to the Seahawks where they get there and all of a sudden they have a foot or a leg injury, and it's like we don't see them, and then they're not ready for the season. So that's been the case with Newton right now, and he missed most of training camp. He came in at the end, and he was inactive for week 1. I don't know if he played very much in week 2. I can't remember if he even got to play, but he's been pretty much a zero for them, mostly because of injury. But Brian was skeptical of this guy, and he was skeptical. He didn't think he was like a well-rounded player. He thought he was like a one-dimensional defensive lineman that was fast but not dominant at the point of attack. Murphy looks like a way more well-rounded player. Newton's been banged up and had trouble getting on the field. Another thing we're not always privy to, but early on, it's like that is a boat race between the two of them.
Well, one of the things I really liked about Murphy was that he was not just a pass rusher, that he was a really stout run defender, and he had strength that I thought absolutely translated to the NFL. I think that's absolutely played out, man. Like he is a factor in both phases of the game. He can play all along the line. I don't think you're putting Johnny Newton at nose tackle, and I don't think you're asking him to hold up against the run. And Johnny Newton may still come out and be a good disruptive pass rusher on the inside. I don't think there's a question. If you asked 32 GMs who they'd pick between the two of them right now, I think all 32 would take Byron Murphy. So, I feel good about that outcome. Another name that we didn't really want, but was commonly, there was rumor what the Seahawks really did like, is Cooper DeJean.
Yeah.
He's not even playing for the Eagles right now. And the Eagles defense is not exactly good either.
Yeah, I keep seeing reports like Cooper DeJean is making highlight play in practice. There's been a bunch of those stuff coming from beat writers, and Nick Sirianni saying Cooper DeJean looks good in practice. And then the game starts, and he's not playing on the field. And he was supposed to be this like instant impact guy, like he was like a gamer, and maybe we'll start to see him because their coverage has been pretty terrible. And they gave up a ton of big plays week 1 to Green Bay. They gave up the end of the game last week. They've struggled. They've looked really bad. Vic Fangio going over there. It's not gone well so far. So that pick more than any scared the crap out of me. And there's still a lot of rumblings that might have been the pick had Murphy been gone.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a lot of like the blue collar skills that Baltimore guys would have liked. And Terry Arnold hasn't hit the ground running either. And Quinion Mitchell's had his up and downs. He shows some cool stuff, but yeah, it's not like any of these guys are like flashing off the screen. It's like, oh, this is the guy they should have taken. But me and you've talked about like the luck required and like the domino effect. And the Seahawks were this close to ending up with like Cooper DeJean and Mike Kafka in this whole offseason. And like maybe we'll start to see he's going to start to play more because I think Philly's D's has some structural issues where they're going to need to try some stuff. And a lot of those Vic Fangio, where like Pete Carroll tried to like get on like the up and coming defensive structure, Vic himself has been struggling the last year and a bit. So I'm happy we're out of that defense. I'm happy we don't have Cooper DeJean, and Ooh, he didn't go to the second round. If they picked him at 16 over Jared Verse, like that would be one that would be eating at us right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I look at. I mean, there's a bunch of ways to take this, and we'll kind of zoom out in a second to look over the past few years as well. But another thing that we talked about was like the Cardinals had this amazing, cadre of picks, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be good. I don't think we ever had any doubts of that. Their second first round pick, Darius Robinson, out, injured. I'm still have questions about him in general. Max Melton, I actually haven't looked, but I don't think Melton is playing very well. The cornerback. Let's double check. He had a decent second game. His first game, not so great. Trey Benson, the running back, I don't know that he's getting much play at this point. Isaiah Adams, the guard. Let's take a look at Isaiah Adams.
I'm not sure if he's even playing much. Will Hernandez has been playing for them at guard.
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick look because I'm curious. Why is it so hard to find? Isaiah Adams. There he is. And we'll get that report. Yeah, he's played 6 snaps. Tip Ryman seems like a fine player, but an odd third-round pick. Elijah Jones, cornerback. He's not even playing.
Trey Benson has been like one of the worst running backs from like a usage standpoint and productivity standpoint. Made Zach Charbonnet look pretty good.
I think that there's a decent chance, Jeff, that they just blew it. Like their drafts over the past 2 years, if I look at the Cardinals draft history, they had such a chance the last 2 drafts to completely reshape that team. I'm not convinced Paris Johnson's ever going to be great. How's he doing this year?
I don't know how he's graded out. I know their offensive line has played well, but I'll be honest. If you could choose between Paris Johnson and Will Anderson,
yeah,
that's the choice they made. They essentially traded out of Will Anderson's spot to take Paris Johnson and a first this year, which ultimately became, and to move up to get. They actually gave up a second-round pick last year that was used on Sam Laporta. So they could have also had like a top 5 pick in the second round if they just took Will Anderson and kept their second-round pick. So they turned that into Darius Robinson and Paris Johnson. Darius Robinson's been injured, but if you look at what they actually could have done with the Marvin Harrison and Kyler and Trey McBride and all the things they have done, there's a lot of good things going on, like their ability to use like the 12 and 13 personnel and spread it out, but their defensive personnel looks awful right now. And if you combine like the good things they have going on and add like 4 blue chip kind of prospects in there, that would be a scary looking team, man. That might be the best looking team in the division moving forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is they kind of were tearing down to build up around Kyler Murray. And Marvin Harrison, Paris Johnson look like they're going to be good players at important positions. So great. But when you're picking number 4 and number 6 overall, kind of expect that. But then you look at the rest. I don't know if any of the rest of these guys, I mean, Michael Wilson, I think is going to be a decent player.
Yeah, he looks solid, but
BJ Ojolari does not look, I mean, he's hurt. Garrett Williams, the corner, I think will be okay. There's not a lot else from that draft last year. And then this most recent draft we just went through, I don't know, man. Like they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 picks in the top 100 this year. And they had 4. So they had 11 top 100 picks in the past 2 seasons. And if you only end up with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Paris Johnson being like cornerstone players, I just think they blew it, man. I really do.
And the funny thing is, I tweeted that out the day of the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Or the third round. I think it was the third round everyone in the media, I think like the Field Yateses of the world was like, look at all these guys Arizona has drafted. I'm like, they just have more picks than everyone else.
Right.
And you're familiar with the top 100 list. So they just have more guys on that list than everyone else. And I'm like, other than Marvin Harrison, I actually don't really like any of their picks. And actually, I think I tweeted it. You can go back and look at my tweets from last April, but I tweeted this out. I thought it felt like a missed opportunity. And like 2 years ago, they got McBride. He's been really good for them. They still have gotten some good players, but what they were left with is now, if you look at like Seattle's 22 draft and what that's looking like, and the amount of talent that they've potentially pulled from just that one draft alone, that's what could buoy them into like this next level. And Arizona, they already had Kyler. They already had the Marvin Harrison pick. They could have done that already, but they just don't have. And I think Arizona's coaching has been really good. Like, it surprised me how good their coaching's been. If you add like another layer of talent to that team, it would be big. And I think they just tried to get cute and they missed on some stuff. Like, why are you taking a backup running back? Why are you taking a backup tight end? Like, I know you want to go bigger, but they have no defensive line. They have no. I felt that way since the draft, and I feel even stronger now. Like, they played great last week, but that's not because of that draft class.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you perfectly set up the segue I was going to take us on, which is you look at 11 top 100 picks in the last two drafts, and they maybe they get two blue chip, like cornerstone players out of it. We're going to compare that to the last 1, 2, 6. We're going to compare that to the last 10 top 100 picks the Seahawks have had over the last 3 drafts. And we're going to talk about who came out better. Before I do that, let me take this moment to remind everyone, if you haven't already, click like and subscribe, and head on over to ftnfantasy.com. Use the new promo code HBAM, HBAM. That will get you 15% off FTN Fantasy. I'm a subscriber. You should be. You will absolutely utilize it to get all your DVOA information, all your fantasy football picks, a Discord channel to talk and get advice on betting or on fantasy football or whatever else. FTNfantasy.com. You want to get FTN Plus package or greater with the HBAM promo code. All right. So yes, Jeff, if you look at the last 10 top 100 picks that John Schneider has had, all right, we're going to go backwards from this last draft over. It's going to take us over till 2022 to get to that many top 100 picks. Okay. This year, Byron Murphy and Christian Haynes are your 2 top 100 picks. The year before, Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Derek Hall, Zach Charbonnet. Okay. The year before that, Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Kenneth Walker, Abe Lucas. That's 10. How many of those players are you like, wow, that was a miss?
I think one right now. I think Charbonnet right now. You have to. I think you have to call that a miss relative to where you took him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely, even if I liked the player, I didn't like the pick at the time.
Yeah.
I was very upset about it.
We both were.
I don't think we were alone in that. But setting that aside for a second, I mean, Abe Lucas is a question mark, but not because whether he's good or not. I think we've seen that he's a good player. It's just a matter of health. If he comes back and he's healthy, even if he's not, let's take him off the board. Jeff, pretty much every one of those guys are guys that could be cornerstone players for you for years. I mean, Devin Witherspoon, how much conversation was there about him versus Jalen Carter?
It's crazy. And if the crazy part is when you look at like each pick individually, and I don't know if you want to do that or go through it, but
yeah.
Like Charles Cross, the context of him is he was the 3rd tackle in that class, and Ike Ekwonu and Evan Neal were like 2 of the surer players. Like Neal was from Alabama. He was reliable. Ekwonu had like the crazy run blocking upside. Ekwonu's been awful, and Evan Neal's not even playing tackle anymore. And I see fans of those 2 fan bases, they probably as down as anyone. And even last year when me and you and Evan and all these guys were like, "Ugh, Charles Cross kind of sucks." I would remind you guys last year that they were like, "Oh, I wish we had Charles Cross. Our guys stink." And now Cross, it's only been 2 games. It's been a sample against no super elite edge rushers, but Cross is the highest graded left tackle in the league on PFF. So not only did they pull what's clearly the best tackle of that draft, Cross is now playing at a level that I'm not even sure he was capable of. And that he was by some people the number like PFF had him as the third prospect in that draft. So you look at that pick, and even like the guy that I thought they might like, and if because it was a shock Cross was even there. The couple guys we thought they liked, Derek Stingley, who's been like a number one corner level in Houston. He's been really good. And the other one was Jordan Davis, who I thought they would like. Jordan Davis has been awful in Philadelphia the last 2 years. And he was a guy I just thought was the sure thing. And a lot of the guys under them were receivers, or Kyle Hamilton was right around there. But Charles Cross is looking like a pretty good pick. And then when you go to Mafe, this is the craziest part. That was the year where they traded Russ, right? So even like Mina, who's the smartest football fan, went on national TV pleading the Seahawks before that day in the draft to take Malik Willis. And then our other guys, Griffin, Maddie, again, smartest film guys, were all on Desmond Ridder, and that they didn't have they didn't have Geno signed at that point. And so when they passed on those guys for Boye Mafe, I think they were all pretty like, what the hell are you guys doing? And then they took Walker, and we can talk about that. But here's the cool thing. If you go pick by pick after Mafe, who's really emerging, he emerged last year, and he looks like he's gotten even a step forward. Let me read some of these names to you. Andrew Booth, I think he's already off the Vikings. Wandale Robinson is like the fourth receiver in in New York. John Mechie, who's the fifth receiver. Josh Pascal, Phildarian Mathis, Alante Taylor, Tyquan Thornton, no longer on New England. Alec Pierce is the fourth receiver in Indianapolis. Sky Moore is the sixth receiver. Trey McBride has turned out. Sam Williams, Ed Ingram, Drake Jackson in San Francisco. Brian Cook in Kansas City. That's the rest of the second round. There's a couple hits in there with George Pickens and a couple other guys, but Boye looks by far the best prospect of that entire crop. Maybe Trey McBride is the only one who you might say you might rather, but an edge rusher who's that young and that raw, that's Cross is clearly the best possible pick you could have made. And then Mafe, the best possible pick you could have made. And the guys under him, a lot of them are either not playing and then Kenneth Walker, when he played this year, we haven't seen much of him. He looked like a top 5 running back in the league. And if they didn't have Kenneth Walker, I don't know who the hell would be our running back right now. It'd be maybe Rashad Penny and Shaq Charbonnet. So it's really hard not to go back. And we haven't talked about Tariq Woolen, was not a top 100 pick, but he came from that draft class. So when you look at like the 22 class, and then you can look at Jalen Carter and having the struggles he's having, and Witherspoon is like an all-pro level corner right now, it's pretty wild to think like not only did they get good players, it is by far like the best guys they could have gotten.
I mean, I'll absolutely own up to I was nervous, Jeff, that the Eagles' first round that year of Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith was going to be the first round. The Seahawks could have had both of those players. They could have had, even after they even after they took Devin Witherspoon at 5, they still could have taken Nolan Smith at 22. They went with JSN. And I was like, oof, let's hope that this works out. Jalen Carter looks like what he was reported to be. Ultra talented, high ceiling guy with questionable motivation and motor and staying power. Nolan Smith looks like nothing so far. Like we went over this week, like Nakobe Dean, like all the Georgia guys. You just talked about Jordan Davis. I don't know that there's anybody right now that would take either of those guys over either of the Seahawks players that they took. Like probably people would take Jalen Carter over JSN.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that'll be the case by the end of the season.
Yeah, it's just with Carter, like you saw it last year, when he flashed, he looked like a dominant player. And that was hard to swallow at first. And I was one of the people that I was struggling with them passing on him, especially once we saw it. But then like the other day, he gets sad in the first series because he slept through a meeting and you're starting to see some of it on. He tailed off in the second half of the year. He's been quiet to start the year. He even acknowledged, I think today, or yesterday, he's like, I'm playing like shit. And he said that. And you look at Witherspoon, who's like, was not only a Pro Bowl player his first year, borderline like all pro when he hit his ceiling in a couple games last year. But like the thing about his like smarts and like his intangibles, and like I was reading Griff talk about like how unique Witherspoon looks at like his ability to read plays, and Griff's really good with that stuff. And like he said, this guy has like Charles Woodson level like identification of routes, and like it was hard to pass like a big guy for a small guy. Like that was the thing I think me and you struggle with. But yeah, like a year later and knowing what they know now just about the people and who you want to invest your money in, like I don't think it's even close between Witherspoon and Carter right now of like who you'd want to invest, like which stock would you want to invest in. And you're right. It's just Nolan Smith was a guy we both liked last year, and he has not done much. Will McDonald and him has similar prospect profiles, and they were more smaller speed guys. But Nolan Smith and a lot of the Philadelphia edge guys are they have zero like hurries this year,
Mm-hmm.
and he played like 19 snaps last week, and JSN had the best game of his career. So it's the more you keep looking at these couple drafts, these 3 drafts in a row. Like not only did they get foundational players, but it looks like they nailed every selection from the context standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I got some news for you as I pulled up some PFF grades for the 2022 draft on both sides of the ball. All right. On the defensive side of the ball, the Seahawks have, and this is just this year's grades, right? So it's not overall, but they have the 5th highest graded guy from that draft on defense. That's Tariq Woolen. Mm-hmm. They have the 7th. That's Boye Mafe. And then you got to scroll ways. I don't think there's anyone else on. So they have the 5th and the 7th best defensive player from that draft. On offense, they have the best in Charles Cross. They also have the 16th in Kenneth Walker. And let's see if they have anybody else listed here. But you basically have, what is that? 4 of the top like 20, 25 guys across both sides of the ball. It's pretty good.
Without even seeing Abe Lucas yet.
So yeah, that's a pretty special draft class. It's looking like. And then we talk about last year, like the 2022 draft, just for people to recap: Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Ken Walker, Abe Lucas, Kobe Bryant, Reek Woolen, Tyreek Smith, Bo Melton, Derek Young. All of those guys are on NFL rosters. All of them but Bo Melton are on the Seahawks roster 2 years later. Tyreek Smith is on the practice squad, but he's still here. That's crazy. That's not normal.
No.
And then last year, 2023, you go Witherspoon, JSN, Derek Hall, who went from bust watch to boom watch. Mm-hmm. Charbonnet, who we've talked about. Bradford, who, I mean, the jury's out. I mean, they like the way he's playing. I talked to Anthony this week in the locker room. He felt like he really didn't put his best foot forward in the first game, but he felt like he started to do that in this last game. Scott Huff's, I think, pretty excited about him. Even he's like, you got to play on the right side of the line in terms of some of the penalties he's getting, but they like, I think he said he'd rather have players that you have to say whoa than players that you have to say giddy up. And Bradford's one of those guys, you know. Cam Young, we don't know. Mike Morris, I feel optimistic about, but we'll see. Olu, probably a wash. Jarek Reed, I'm optimistic about. And then Kenny McIntosh. I don't think that's as star-studded. But if you hit on those first 3, Spoon, JSN, and Derek Hall, that would mean you would have hit on a franchise left tackle, 2 edge rushers, and a starting running back, like maybe a top 5 running back if he stays healthy, and and a, top tier wide receiver in
Mm-hmm.
2 drafts.
That's an entire roster core.
Right.
And really, that's how the first rendition of the championship Seahawks were built. They had the 2010 draft and the 2011 draft. And then 2012 is the one that pushed it over the top with Russ and Bobby. And they went from being a solid team to a championship level team. And if you look at where the Seahawks team was and the teams that are emerging in the league, it's the teams that hit on these draft picks. And these 2 to 3 level drafts just have transformed what was a pretty shitty roster to one of the emerging ones in the whole league. And now you combine that with what they've seen from Geno, and it's a pretty exciting thing they got going on.
And the coaching,
Yeah.
And the coaching, right? Like you said, with Arizona, they seem to have some decent coaching there, but do they have the horses to ride? And this week, tomorrow, we're going to get our first look at Tyrese Knight as a starter, most likely.
Yep. That's a big game.
Right. And I do think it's different when you ask a rookie to come into a game he wasn't expecting to play, probably wasn't as sharp as he would be otherwise. Not the worst game to get your feet wet. Excuse me. Tried to save that, but couldn't. I'm really curious. This is a huge game, Jeff, for a guy like Tyrese Knight, because how do the Dolphins attack you on the ground? It's speed. It's to the edges. It is going to absolutely be something that will test a linebacker in his pursuit, his angles, his tackling. I think those are the things that he does best.
Yeah, and if they had more of like a boot action game and like what Kyle Shanahan does than what he did to the Seahawks linebackers, it would be a little worrisome. But I think like identifying keys and like running and making tackles in space, I think that's what Knight has shown pretty favorable. And I think identifying coverage assignments, if they had like a better tight end usage or a better like middle of the field receiver, that might be a little hard on him. If they had to play like George Kittle this week and had Knight covering him, it would be a little scary. But yeah, I think this is a game he could excel, and you could see his speed and his tackling ability. And you saw his tackling ability in run defense last week was pretty solid. I think he had some issues in coverage, but this is a game where I think they're gonna need him to look good, because Mike McDaniel is going to try to stress you every way they can, especially with their inferior quarterbacks. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because all of a sudden all those other linebackers we were all beating our heads against, they didn't take Mike Barrett, they didn't take McGee. Who was the other one? Cedric Gray's been on IR. Oh, we're like, they took this guy 2 rounds early. Early impressions. Knight might be the best one. So it's going to be
Junior
fascinating.
Colson even. Junior Colson's not playing that well for the Chargers.
No, and everyone acknowledged it was a bad linebacker draft, and so we did fall for guys like Junior Colson. Edge Cooper, again, he hasn't played much either. And so all of a sudden that Tyrese Knight pick, which everyone just thought ruined their draft, we could probably spend more time on whether they should have taken AJ Barner or not. But yeah, that's probably not necessary. However, this draft class, if Knight hits, it's combining what we think Murphy is, and the jury's still out on Christian Haynes. We've seen him play a series or something, but there's not a lot of guys where you're like, ooh, all of a sudden, if Tyrese Knight is good and could be a starter, and they don't have to go into free agency to sign 2 linebackers again, it really just adds some credibility to what John, and especially what McDonald, can do in the draft too.
Yeah. Yeah. How much do you think that the last 3 drafts have kind of removed some of the stain from John Schneider's drafting record?
Oh, it should. It absolutely should. Because there was just a period where from after 12 on, other than 15, where they just blew draft after draft after draft. And the 17 draft is by far the most egregious Seahawks. And if you want to get me worked up or spend some time investigating, everyone will talk about Jamal Adams or Jimmy Graham. To me, it's the 2017 draft. They could have like completely fixed their team and turned it into a pile of crap. So there was a stink around them, and they were like a laughing stock on draft Twitter. And like, there's bits like that Jody Allen like stepped back in the room, or she took control of the draft, or Colin Cowherd likes to say like that's where like Pete got out of it. I don't know the real story, but whatever has changed between the last couple drafts, John Schneider's now looked at, I think, as pretty clearly a top 10 GM. And I think this combination of drafts with the early drafts, I think this has really helped restore, I just think, his credibility around the average fan.
As we kind of head towards close here, let's talk a little bit about the game tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're a little closer than we were when we talked on Wednesday. What are you hearing? What are you thinking for the Seahawks in this game against the Dolphins?
So a lot of people saw the New England game on Thursday, and they came to the conclusion that the Seahawks might be in trouble just because of how New England looked like I thought they would look before the year. I think that's horse crap. I think that's a bad way of approaching. But I think I did come away thinking that I didn't love Mike McDonald's game plan on defense. And seeing Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, who are not an aggressive defense, go up and just attack that offensive line with blitzes, I was a little surprised they were so vanilla. When I heard in week one, the Seahawks put all their stuff out of this bag and they screwed. It looked like they were pretty vanilla and they struggled. So I actually came out of that game just thinking I didn't love McDonald's game plan. And seeing another team, I think that reinforced that opinion. But I don't think it impacts the quality of the Seahawks at all. I don't think a road game coming off of overtime on a short week is any. So in this game, I still feel that I think it's a good wake-up call. And I think the Seahawks are going to have a really good defensive game plan this week. And I think they're going to need to open the bag a little bit. And yeah, a lot of the professional gamblers have kind of liked Miami against the spread, which surprised me. It opened up at 6. It's dropped to 4.5. In some places 4 now. And going up against a backup quarterback in Seattle, that shocked me, even though they have 10 days rest. But listen to some of these gambling shows. A lot of it comes down to the Seahawks' confidence between Walker and Charbonnet, oddly enough. And the Seahawks with Walker, people think is a potential powerhouse team. And with Charbonnet, they're they become a one-dimensional offense that can't block. And so I think the strategy is very similar to last week. I said the strategy for the Seahawks last week was they had to score early. And if they do, and New England has to pass, the game's over. We saw that play out with the Jets. They scored 2 touchdowns early. New England couldn't function. I think this is the exact game plan. I think you're going to have to be a little more aggressive on defense, even though it is a backup quarterback. They do have a lot of players that can scare you. I think you need to force Skylar Thompson into some mistakes. So I think they might have some success early. But I think ultimately the Seahawks just have the talent advantage. I think this is a week we're going to see much better defensive play. And I think the combination of what the Seahawks can do in the passing game, but if it becomes a one-dimensional game where you're going to have to where the Seahawks are beating their head trying to run the ball and you're relying too much on the offensive line, it could be an uncomfortably close game. And so I have a lot of faith in McDonald, but this is a team that struggles on the road. They struggle against more physical teams. And I think if McDonald is a little more aggressive like they were in the first week on defense, I think they have the potential to take a big lead and just pull away pretty early.
Yeah, it's funny. I agree with so much of what you said. And I think I love dualities. I love where there's, maybe seeming like two conflicting things can both be true. And one of them here is that I don't think the Seahawks have proven almost anything yet. I don't feel like I can lean on this is a great thing on this team. I have some ideas, but there's not enough evidence to feel really confident about that with any of the things that we've seen. At the same time, I think their odds of winning 12 or more games is meaningfully higher than it was to start the season. Not because of as much because of the Seahawks. I mean, winning their first 2 games helps for sure. But I think the state of the NFC and the state of the NFC West is much weaker than I would have expected going in. And some of the teams that have shown real strength are not on their schedule. They don't play the Saints. Mm-hmm. They do play the Vikings, but they don't play the Bucks. And so I just look at that schedule now and I'm to start the season, I would have said the Seahawks are only going to, they literally went through and did this exercise. They were only going to be favored in 5 of their 17 games going into the year. I think that could be more than half now for sure. And so I do think that that's shifted their potential win total more than even their own play.
Yeah, the win total's gone up to 9.5.
Really? I haven't
Yeah,
looked.
the win total's gone up to 9.5. Their odds in a bunch of things have improved significantly. I was looking this morning. I'm just pulling it up now. Byron Murphy is now the number 2 ranked defensive rookie of the year candidate. He went from plus 1400 to plus 650. So his odds have almost doubled. Mike McDonald is now the second option for coach of the year behind Jim Harbaugh, who's got a quarterback with a high ankle sprain. So, and there's an award for the assistant coach of the year. Ryan Grubb is now the 4th leading candidate for the assistant coach. And he had a guy who had a pretty bad first game. So the odds makers seem to believe what you're saying. I mean,
Their odds to win the NFC West as well have gone to like plus 250 or plus 300 after
plus 300, and they were 700.
Yeah.
And that was winning 2 games against 2 of the worst teams in the league. So that does agree to you that things are falling apart around them. And the Rams to me and you looked like a team that we really liked their offseason. They've had maybe the worst luck in the first 2 weeks I've ever seen a team have. San Francisco right now is down Kittle, Debo, and McCaffrey. And I don't think McCaffrey's going to be back for week 6. And Trent Williams had one of the worst games he's had as a Niner. And then you look at Detroit has not played well. And Detroit was like the team like I would have banked on. Jordan Love is injured in Green Bay. Detroit, Ben Johnson, all of a sudden, has had a rough first 2 games. They've had awful game plans. And they blew a game they should have won. So Philly, Dallas, there's not much you go in there other than New Orleans. There hasn't, I think, and Minnesota, Minnesota kind of gave a game plan of how you can attack the Niners. So I think you're onto something here.
All right. Everyone close your eyes for a second. I'm gonna paint a picture for you. Go into tomorrow and the Seahawks win their game. Okay? They do what they have to do. You picture however they do it, but they come out and they win the game. They go to 3-0. The Detroit Lions go into Arizona and they win a game they're favored to win against the Cardinals. They send the Cardinals to 1-2. And then the LA Rams take advantage of a 49ers team that's missing George Kittle, missing Debo Samuel, missing Christian McCaffrey, has an injured Charvarius Ward, and they find a way with their backs against the wall at home to pull one out against their rivals in the NFC West. Both of those teams exit the game and exit the weekend 1-2. Impossible? I don't think it's impossible.
I don't think so either. And
you could end up 2 games up in the NFC West after 3 weeks over all 3 of the teams. And that would be something worth celebrating, dude.
It's crazy. This just seemed like a year that was going to be just hard because of all the NFC teams in our division. And Arizona might be a team we have to worry about. But yeah, I don't think anything you said is unrealistic at all. And we're going to learn a lot about Brock Purdy this week. It's funny that as soon as one of their 9 All-Pros goes out, everyone's like, oh, Brock Purdy is allowed to all of a sudden be average now because he doesn't have 9 All-Pros like everyone else in the NFL has 3 or 2. But when he loses them, all of a sudden it's okay. But yeah, there's not a lot of teams that like even the Saints and the Vikings, like they're coached really well, but like they don't have the talent the Seahawks do. And we obviously need to see more than the Seahawks. We're going to learn a lot about them in the next month or so. And they haven't played a great game yet. They've had like silos of their team that have looked really good. Like one week it was the passing game, the week before it was the defense and the run game in the second half. But if they could kind of put things together, there is opportunity there that I just didn't think would be there. And having the Rams and then the Niners really beat up, and it's been an unbelievable fortune of good luck so far. And they have a chance to do something with this that I just didn't think was there. I was the one saying, let's be cautious, let's be cautious, let's be cautious. If this could change in a couple weeks, and this could get really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'd characterize it right now is the Seahawks. They've climbed the steps and they're standing in front of the door. Like
Yeah.
they haven't yet even knocked on it. They haven't rung the doorbell. They're just standing there.
Mm-hmm.
You win against I think this Dolphins game is incredibly dangerous. I think it is very hard for I think it's very hard for teams emotionally to take a backup quarterback seriously. And when you've got the coaching talent and the offensive skill talent that the Dolphins do, that's a really dangerous collection, especially a team that's going to come in here, feel like they've been told all week that they have no chance, that their season's over. They're going to all want to prove that. And one thing, if I have one like micro, I wouldn't even call it a criticism, but it's a question I've got about Mike McDonald is, when I've asked him about anything approaching how to get your team emotionally prepared, or like the emotional aspect of the game, he's like, what are you talking about? Like, he is pretty, like, he's X's and O's. He's like by the book. He's not thinking that way. And I think that's generally fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. But these are the kinds of games where if you don't like have your finger on the pulse of the team, even last week might have been an indicator where that defense did come out flat. And that's something Pete Carroll would not do generally. He always had his teams motivated and ready to play, partially because I think he knew how to press the right buttons on all the individuals. Mike might not be that same kind of coach. He might be great in a lot of other ways. But like, this is that kind of game where I almost asked him, and then I was like, I know exactly what he's going to say. But I was like, hey, coach, the Packers didn't have their quarterback and they just went in and won by running the football for a few hundred yards. Is that something you're going to bring up to your team just to make sure they know you're not guaranteed a win with a backup? I know he'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, he would not think about that at all. But to me, that Jeff, like, that could be a factor. Like, so they gotta get through this game with a win. If they do, then man, that Monday night game is going to be, that's a pivotal one, man. Like, then that really, like, it builds just the way you want it to where I'm not scared of that game. I want to see that team in that situation.
Yeah, and Mike talks about stacking wins and things like that. This is a big game for like his philosophy. You need to stack a win like that to set up this big test against. And it would not help to the people who think like, oh, the Seahawks have just beaten up on crappy teams if they go out and they lose to Skylar Thompson against a team that has not won a lot as an underdog. Their record as an underdog, Miami, is very poor. So there's a couple of things that I'm with you on the trap stuff. Like there's a lot of elements of this game that do scare me. I'm usually like a pessimist, or I'm more cautious, and I always think the worst. So there's a lot of this game that makes me uneasy. But there's a couple things that kind of help in that regard. Like the fact that they didn't play well defensively last week, I think that helps. Because if they just like cruise through that game and they were feeling themselves, I think that would be a big reason where this could blow up in their face. But I think the fact that Mike was probably on them all week about how they played defensively, and they were not good defensively when you watch the Jets and how they just went at them with 7 guys on the line and they couldn't move the ball at all. And the Seahawks kind of sat back and they got blown up. And they should have lost that game in a lot of respects. It wasn't for Geno. So I think that helps. Another thing that helps, I think, is Tyreek and Achane. I think the way those guys, I think you have to be alert playing those guys. And if it was just like even if it was the Niners a little bit that don't have those like deep explosive speed guys, I think just like they're going to be on them. Like anytime Tyreek gets the ball, he could score. And I don't think anyone wants to get embarrassed. And I think those are the things that are coming back into my head. I think that I hope like the offensive line just doesn't completely suck again and they can't function at all, because I don't know how much of a running game they're going to get this week. And I know that's going to be a big part of their emphasis, even though I'm not sure that I would try to emphasize just do what they did last week in the passing game. But yeah, I think that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping the fact that defensive performance was pretty weak last week, I think that will be just a big coaching point. I think that will keep them on their toes.
I think that's right. I'll tell you, I mean, I talked to Trey Brown this week. Reek Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, they have never played a game against Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Or Jalen Waddle or Devon Achane. And I think that kind of speed, Woolen's clearly got that kind of speed too. But I think that when you play that kind of speed the first time, the first few plays, it just takes a while to kind of acclimate and change your angles. And so I don't think any player in the league that plays Tyreek Hill for the first time can possibly be ready for playing Tyreek Hill the first time. And so I'm just braced for that. And I think Seahawks fans should be braced for that, that there's going to be could be some bumps. But then on offense, I think the Pharaoh Brown coming back from injury could be a sneaky big thing. I think he could really help in the blocking for the run game and in the pass game. And Mike McDonald and Ryan Grubb seem to feel pretty good about their run game plan this week. And Zach Charbonnet has to know that he has not put good film out there. And it's time, dude. Like, you're not getting, like, ideally, you're not getting many more chances. Zach, Ken Walker comes back healthy and you're good. So Charbonnet is not taking advantage of his starts. And so this could be a game. Like, if Zach Charbonnet goes out there and plays the way I think he can, great. But he has looked slow, and he has looked like he's looked non-dynamic. So I think it could be a really interesting game. I think this is going to be a very aggressive, very hard-fought game for the Dolphins. The Seahawks could prove a lot to me in this game, a lot more than probably to most people, because I think this is going to be a tougher game than people realize.
Yeah, and this is a game where I think the Seahawks are fortunate to have Connor Williams on the team, because if anyone knows the Dolphins inside and out, it's him. And you could say the same about Jordan Brooks, but they're running completely different schemes than they ran last year. And so I think Connor Williams knowing that offense, I think that will be a big help in their preparation. And Jerome Baker, same thing. They're running a totally different scheme defensively. I think he'll know the offense, but it's interesting. They do have some key assets to prepare for this game. So it's unfortunate Jerome Baker isn't going to get to play in this sort of revenge kind of game. They cut him. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Jordan Brooks and Connor Williams go up against their old teams. And let's just hope we can actually enjoy a game where we don't have to sweat it out the whole time like last week.
I'll take whatever as long as they come out with the W, dude.
Yeah.
Healthy and W. Those are the things I care about. All right. I'm going to say for everyone that has not already, please make sure you head over to ftnfantasy.com. Use promo code HBAM. New promo code HBAM is what you want. That will get you access to 15% off. Subscription to FTN Fantasy. FTN Plus is the package you want. That gets you DVOA. That gets you the Stats Hub. It gets you all the great stuff. So make sure you utilize that. And then thank you. If you haven't already followed at Real Jeff Simmons, please do. It's his show on the Saturday, so give him a follow. And click like and click subscribe. Would love to have as many of you as part of this community as possible. I will be in the press box, actually, tomorrow for the game. I'll figure out how to do pregame as I go, so keep an eye out for pregame. We'll also do postgame. We'll see what I can do in terms of where I will do postgame. Not sure that Lumen will let me down there. I will be covering the postgame press conferences, so postgame show will come a little bit later, usually probably 60 minutes after the game, I would guess, is my best estimate. So the best way to know is make sure you click the bell to get notified. That will tell you when I go live. Good luck, everybody. This is a big game tomorrow. Let's see if we can get to 3-0. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. I am Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been episode 181 of HawkBlogger Mornings.